What's up, friends? Welcome back to another episode of NFT 365. And we are very big fans here of the podcast on thinking forward, looking forward, focused on innovation, not dwelling on the past. But I do think we need to know where we've been or where we've come to understand what got us here we're at today. And I also think it's important for us to put a little context around things, because I hear this a lot where people are, referring to, hey, these last 18 months have been a roller coaster, and these blue chip projects have been around. But I think it's important to have like an understanding of the timeline of events that have really happened in this NFT space over the last, let's just say, 18 months or so. And so what we're going to do on today's episode is I'm going to kind of walk you through. I'm not going to go all the way back to 2017, but I'm going to kind of, bring us into 2020, some of the highlights, some of the big, important things to understand that happened last year. And then some of the things that you probably thought were just like, hey, this project's been around for forever and this project is OG. And you might be surprised that some of your favorite projects or projects that you look up to have actually been around only since January or since February or March or even April or May. So with that being said, we are going to jump into that real quick. Remember, we are counting down to November 11th, where we will be selling our Mosaic collection. We also have an AI art drop tomorrow on Nifty Gateway at 11:11 a.m. We'll have two pieces that will go live. Actually, if you're watching the YouTube video or the live video, you can actually see the art behind me on the green screen that I created for this week's drop. And I just want to say thank you for everyone that helped us sell out my very first AI art drop this past Friday, and excited. I'll tell you, the amount of people that are interested, it seems, for tomorrow's two pieces should be a heck of a lot of fun as the drop happens. But with that being said, let's jump into kind of like the history here. And for full context, I launched my creator coin, ADHD coin, back in March of 2020. I first created a kind of like a online, let's just say NFT focused account in, I believe it was in October of the year before, for Top Shots. When I first heard about Top Shot coming out, I believe the NBA was in the bubble at the time with the pandemic. And I was like, oh, this is like fantasy football for fantasy basketball, but there's also like these capturable moments. And so I haven't been around since the early days. And I actually interviewed Mac, who was one of the co-founders of CryptoChicks and Dapper Labs. You can go back and listen to that episode of the podcast if you want some of that like historical information. But just to bring people up the stage, and we'll start at kind of where we were and kind of work our way up. 2017, CryptoPunks, CryptoChicks launched. 2019, MetaMask kind of started to create a product that started to be used for kind of the NFT world. And then October of 2020, Top Shot launched on the Flow blockchain. That was kind of the Top Shot. When I hear people what got them into NFTs, there's really like three things that people tell me, right? It's Top Shot, it's Beeple, and it's Gary Vaynerchuk. Like those are the three things that I hear more often than not when it comes to where most of our community, not saying everybody, but that's where most of our community kind of got onboarded. But I remember sitting in a Clubhouse room in February of 2021. So we're just going to fast forward to February 2021. And Ferocious, the 18-year-old digital artist, he actually dropped I think he dropped one of his first pieces in that February of 2021. And I can't remember how much it sold, $3 or $4 million worth of sneakers that he did, like a sneaker collab. And I remember people were buzzing about it in Clubhouse. And that was like kind of like my first like hearing about, wow, okay, these NFT things have like this kind of, virality. And then of course, in March, there was the most expensive NFT tweet of all time, which was Jack Dorsey, that he minted the first tweet ever on Twitter, and it dropped and it sold for millions of dollars in March. And that happened to be the same March that Beeple, resold one of his pieces of artwork for $6.6 million. leading into the the Christie's auction that he had, which is really, I remember this day where I was when I heard that, his piece sold for $69.3 million in March. So that was just March of last year, if you're listening to this right now at, around the time of recording. And that was his first 5,000 days drop. And I will just tell you that, that's the inspiration for the podcast. It's the inspiration for our collection. But I didn't really understand all the nuances of that until the fall. And we'll talk about that as we go. But if you think about it, this was, that Beeple drop in March was before most of the projects that you're aware of. Really, probably the only project that most of you, besides CryptoPunks and CryptoKitties and some of those legacy ones, I know some people are CyberKongz fans, and CyberKongz dropped in that March. But then it was really April where people kind of got aware of a lot of other things. I remember being in Clubhouse, and I remember, Bored Ape Yacht Club was doing rooms in like late February or late March, announcing that they were going to do their pre-sale April 23rd. And then I remember Veefriends and Gary Vaynerchuk did a Clubhouse room announcing that Veefriends would launch in May. He didn't really give us a time, but he just was teaching people how to get their MetaMask and the fact that you needed a certain amount of ETH. And then, of course, in that April is when Bored Ape Yacht Club pre-sale happened on April 23rd. I remember May 1st was the first time that the Bored Ape Yacht Club was actually trending on Twitter. So this was May of last year that Bored Ape Yacht Club was trending on Twitter. About a week later or so, both Meebits and Veefriends launched. And just for context on that, most people talk about the $92 million that Veefriends earned from the mint. It took 13 days, I believe, to mint out. The gift goat, I think, was the last ones of that collection. And don't hold me to these, like, the little details don't really matter. But what I think the more important part of this is this was just May of last year. So the almost, start of summer, and we had Bored Ape Yacht Club, Meevits, Veefriends, and Gutter Cat Gang. All of them just kind of launched around that time frame. This was also the time frame that in June was the first time that Opensea came a much more household name. And that's because they actually jumped this past June from 150 million in sales to over 329 million in sales in July. So all of a sudden with Meebits, Veefriends, of course, CryptoPunks kind of exploding. You had CyberKongz and Bored Ape Yacht Club all dropping. That June, July secondary market started to explode. And then, walking into that summer, we had Cool Cats mint, World of Women dropped. I remember World of Women dropped. It was a 0.08 mint, but you could mint as many as you want, only 20 per transaction. And I remember some of the gas prices that were friends of mine, were minting back then, right? And the gas prices were almost more than the 0.08 mint for World of Women. Boss Beauties also dropped around that same time. And then in that summer, so if we just look at last summer, a summer ago, this is when we had things like Art Blocks launched, the very first Findenza drop. We had Axie Infinity, one of the first games where you were actually, it kind of got a little bit more mass adoption. There started to be that play to earn conversation. We had Lazy Lions dropped, Crypto Dads, Fame Lady Squad. This was also in the summer when Fame Lady Squad was exposed that there was actually Russian men that were posing as women founders that launched Fame Lady Squad, which anyone that listens to the podcast knows I've actually had all three of the co-founders that took over that project after those Russians were exposed. The three people took it over: Bored Becky, Data NFT, and NFT Ignition. They've all been guests on the podcast. But that all happened that summer. We also had Loot, one of the kind of like fantasy wordplay NFTs dropped that summer. And then also Rarible launched, one of the first marketplaces that wasn't just like PFP art and also had more than just kind of one blockchain available to it. And so that was most of the summer last year. And so if you're listening to this right now, oftentimes people make you feel like these shits have been around for forever. But a lot of the projects that you've heard of, I haven't even mentioned yet, right? Most of the ones that you're holding, like maybe Lazy Lions, maybe Crypto Dads, maybe Fame Lady Squad. But it wasn't until so August happened, right? We're getting into August of last year. We had the Nouns DAO drop, and I remember, man, I kicked myself. This is probably one of the ones I kicked myself more so than anything else. The Nouns DAO dropped, and I believe I was saving my ETH for, man, I can't remember the name of the project. This is how good the project was. It didn't even last on Opensea a couple of months. But rather than jumping into Nouns DAO, I actually jumped into a different project. Now Nouns DAO is one of the most cherished and worthy NFT projects that have been out there. But then in August, I remember Stephen Curry was one of the first major athletes that put his profile photo as a Bored Ape, and that was that hit a big mainstream attention. That's also when Sotheby's actually auctioned off 101 Bored Ape Yacht Club NFTs, along with like Meebits and a couple CryptoPunks, for over $24 million in that August. And so I look at that August as there was a lot of people that were building and talking about their collections, that they learned about NFTs in May, June from Bored Ape Yacht Club, Veefriends, and Top Shots. They started to build them through the summer. August came, and then September is when we saw a lot of drops, right? So Deadfellas dropped, Animice dropped, CryptoChicks, the original CryptoChicks dropped, CPG, Crypto Package Goods dropped. All of this kind of happened in September. And then October was also the time frame that Solana started to pick up, I would say, NFT momentum, to where they started to really assert themselves as the second most, I would say, popular NFT location. Now, we can argue if they're second most popular, but this was actually, Magic Eden didn't exist yet. We were doing it on SolSea or Soul Art. Solana was definitely still if Solana felt very crypto, very like unhinged, where we started to be able to use OpenSea, and we had a lot of these things that were going on. But, gas prices then were a little bit crazy, but that was August, September. Now, October, so right about a year from right now, if you're listening to this episode around when we launched it, there was a whole slew of projects that dropped exactly a year ago. And many of them are going to have their 1-year birthday this month. And one of the ones that I jumped in big on was Playboy NFTs. Playboy NFTs was one of the first ones to allow fiat and credit card purchases that also put the NFT on the main net into your MetaMask wallet. And it was wild. I remember the week mint process that was going on there. And it was so hard to get on the list. And then once you got it, they sold out so quickly. But we also had Doodles minted there. And funny enough, I remember I had enough ETH to buy a second Playboy NFT or a first Doodles NFT, and I chose a second Playboy NFT back then. This was also when Kaiju Kings had come out. And then one of the most hyped NFT projects with a Discord, they were giving away a Lamborghini in their Discord. Their Discord had over 200,000 members. That was the Mechaverse raffle. I've talked about that on the podcast a couple times because, well, I won the raffle on that, and I rode that thing to a high point of 8 ETH when ETH was 4K. And I rode it all the way down to 1 ETH when I sold it this past January. But Mechaverse really shook up the entire market because it was the most hyped launch. And then when the art revealed, it was also really one of the biggest kind of drop-offs directly after art reveal that we saw. And one could argue this is when a lot of the trends started to emerge, November, December of last year. So a lot of the trends that we are very familiar with right now, those trends have not had their first year anniversary. Something like Premint.xyz, something like Collabland that actually worked. Like those things did not exist a year ago right now. And that's why this is such an important, episode that I believe is because it's easy to feel like you missed the boat, right? The good old days. But let's also remember the good old days weren't that long ago. And there's a lot of things that we can learn from, but there's also, in retrospect, there's a lot of things that I look at and be like, if we had this would have went different. Or if I had known what I know now, holy hell, I would have made different decisions. But that also leads us into November 1st, which is actually when, I believe for me, that's when everything went to another level, and that was NFT NYC. I remember, going on the train up from DC to New York, and it was also a reminder the lack of diversity in this space that November, because up until then, we had a couple women's projects that launched. There was the Crypto Bros, but I will tell you, there was very few, if any, women on stage at that November NFT NYC. There was very few minorities walking around and were part of the communities there at the NFT NYC. And I remember, to me, that being a very glaring gap, and it's still a gap that we have not done a great job of solving, but it's definitely one that I think spurred a lot of collections that dropped kind of after that. But in full context, November 1st was the NFT NYC. November 4th and 5th is when we started brainstorming this podcast and buying an NFT every day for a year. And then 6 days later, November 11th, we launched our podcast. So November 11th, right after NFT NYC, we decided to launch our podcast here. And I'll tell you, during that time, you had Clone X launched. You had the MFers launch, which one could argue their meme style and kind of like, kind of F you to the man approach was really interesting to see how the MFers kind of emerged. Because like the MFers were very, I wouldn't even say polarizing, but it was a unique approach to a project. And like, it's funny to say that now, because like, if you look on Icy Tools or any of the tools now, the name, we have dick butts and butt jokes and penis heads and the nudies. I mean, the names of these projects and like the envelope that we're pushing are all over the place right now, but it wasn't that way kind of back then. And then, that led into kind of November, where we had Artifact was actually bought by Nike. In December, you had the Proof Collective. They dropped their NFT. I remember I was on the list to buy it. I believe it was 1 ETH. And I was like, I'm not going to spend 1 ETH on that pass. Oh man, do I miss that. I mean, CPG was the same thing. I was in the clubhouses that CPG was kind of born into, and I didn't see the magic of the membership model and like the builder community model that both Proof Collective and CPG were building. I just didn't see it at the time. And hey, such is life. Also, one of my favorite projects dropped back then, Alien Friends, Psychedelics Anonymous, the In-Betweeners dropped there in December. We actually dropped our NFT, where we dropped 22 founders NFTs and 365 of our super-powered NFTs that we dropped December 12th. So we dropped our very first collection there. Of course, sold out in January. But I say all of that because that just brings us to the start of this year, right? And I remember, we sold out of our collection around the same time that we hit episode 100 of the podcast, and a lot of these things. And that January was really interesting because Looks Rare, the first market to kind of take aim at Opensea directly. Looks Rare was created and dropped. It was one of the, I remember like you had these Looks Rare tokens and you were going to make money on like how all that was kind of going down. And then Azuki launched, right? Many people talk about Azuki as if it's as old as CryptoPunks or even as old as Veefriends or Bored Ape Yacht Club, but they actually dropped on January 12th. And then we had this kind of emergence of like alpha group inner circles, like 888 inner circle dropped. You had a lot of, I would say, spin-off Rug Radio. A lot of these, like, you had to pay a membership or a token or an NFT to get into a lot of these alpha clubs around January, February timeframe. And then that kind of like brought us into, what ended up being probably one of the biggest news stories was when Yuga, the parent company for Bored Ape, announced I believe it was in March, that they announced that they bought CryptoPunks and Meebits, right? Two of those projects in March. And in March, they also launched the Ape coin in the Yuga network. So, this is such an interesting thing for context because, a lot changes in this space and we go really, really fast. But there's a lot of things that have still just been brand new. Like, March of this year, Moonbirds did not exist. OK Bears did not exist on Solana. Goblin Town did not exist, right? So Moonbirds and OK Bears dropped in April. Goblin Town dropped on May 19th. Of course, the next NFT NYC was in the June timeframe. For us, not only it was great that we sold out of our NFT projects, but we also debuted our proof of podcast NFTs that many of you hold that are listeners to the podcast. But I say all that because it brings us to right now. And I've heard a lot of Twitter spaces recently, and people are talking about like, you got to go in and buy into the projects that are blue chips because they've been around for so long, and they're at the top for the most volume. But I will just say, like, there is so much runway and so much room for great projects that have either not been minted yet, or have been minted and have been building and building and building and have just yet not got the public attention, or have not been infused with a bunch of new blood. And we've seen some projects kind of pop off that are newer. Renga happens to be one of them. We did mint the Art of Seasons Renga project here in our NFT component, right? We minted them here in our collection. We minted Dead Fellas, their Skull Troopers in our collection. We did the Little Pudgies, which is the Pudgy Penguin little project that we minted as well. The Probably Nothing NFT project, which just dropped theirs as well. And so I think I say all of that, I give you all of that context. And I think this is an important episode because there's a lot of people that are going to feel like they're on the outside in, or like they don't understand all of the nuances. But here's the truth. I believe that a lot of the things that worked back last year especially no longer work today. Even, I would argue, a lot of the strategies that worked in January, February, and March of this year were things that would not work today. Now, I think April, May, June, right, from the Moonbirds drop to OK Bears to the Utes list, to a lot of the kind of projects that are in and around those kind of ecosystems. But like, I remember when the Mutant Ape Yacht Club dropped, right? Mutant Ape Yacht Club, I think they dropped, I think it was the summer, I think it was August, end of August of last year is when the Mutants dropped. And it was one of the first kind of like second projects. And I think it was originally only for, original holders, right? And then there was a lot of pushback and backlash around that. And it's so funny because now so many projects are dropping their third and their fourth and their fifth, and they have lands and they have gaming and they have tokens. And I just think it's really interesting to think about it, the fact that, Bored Ape Yacht Club announced their pre-sale April 23rd of 2021. It wasn't until March, 11 months later, that they dropped the Ape coin, which was their, kind of coin, as far as adding tokenomics within their ecosystem. So here's my message. For all of us that are impatient, right? Raise your right hand right now if you're listening to this podcast. If you're driving, don't raise your right hand. Or if you're on a treadmill, don't raise your right hand. But raise your right hand and say, I am the most impatient human being in the face of the earth, and I am an NFT owner, right? Because we are the most impatient people, because we want a game tomorrow. We want a full metaverse environment. We want tokenomics. We want staking. We want all of these things. But if we look at the context, and many of the projects we look up to, they were building during a bull market, during an explosion of liquidity. We had the airdrops of the different coins that we were airdropped, just for what we were doing in transaction volume. And then on top of it, it still took them 11 months to drop the Ape coin. And I mean, for me, that Ape coin is a drop that I will never forget, because I was exploited and my wallet was compromised via the Ape coin exploit. It had nothing to do with Yuga. It was someone that, it was an exploit that was built around that. But I just think it's important for us. I did an episode a couple of days ago calling, we must slow down to speed up. And funny enough, that's actually the name of one of the art pieces that I will be dropping tomorrow for our AI art drop. But we also just have to recognize that although this space changes fast and everything is fast paced and there's lots going on, I mean, we're doing a podcast every single day for heaven's sake. It's also just important to recognize that even some of the projects that you look up to haven't been around that long. and they're still learning as well. So we need to hold them accountable. We need to give them grace. We need to have empathy. And we also have to recognize that if you are thinking about launching a project right now and you've decided it's probably not the right good time for you, good for you. And it's not a bad thing to wait. It's not a bad thing to hold back. If I had to do it all over again, I would have dropped our NFTs originally on Ethereum, right? When we dropped ours on the Layer 2 Rally network, when we sold our NFTs back in December of 2021. And, hey, we sold out. We sold 22 of them at $5,000. We sold 365 of them at $365 USD. But they're the secondary volume, a lot of the lessons that I learned back in December. But here's the funny part. No one was really talking about those things back then. Now it's conversation with every project that I'm advising. We're talking about where's the attention? How are you marketing to your existing holders versus the future holders that you want? How are you onboarding Web 2 people? How are you teaching MetaMask? How are you thinking about which secondary markets make the most sense for your project? And where do the things like a music NFT fit in here, right? I didn't even mention Spotty Wi-Fi's first NFT music NFT that he dropped. We had him on the podcast. Of course, we had the amazing Sammy Arriaga on the podcast talking about his drop and his music collection. I remember that being in my wallet. I remember Ape in Productions, their very first one with Timberland, and I was able to own an NFT that gives me the musical rights to play the Ape Shit song by Ape in Productions. All of that happened in the fall of last year. And so we are less than a year old with many of the things that we are still using and still building. And so let's remember, there's a lot of space for us to build. There's a lot of opportunity for us to grow. And even if you feel like those OGs are flexing, just remember they're not that OG. They haven't been around that long. And We've been taught since a young age, don't judge a book by its cover. I'm going to leave you with this. Don't judge someone's thought leadership, someone's influence, someone's knowledge of this space based on the PFP that they're wearing as their Twitter profile or even the NFTs in their wallet. I heard a guy flexing in one of the Twitter spaces the other day about how many Bored Apes he bought and how many he owns. I went and looked at his wallet. And I will just tell you, he's upside down over $500,000 in NFTs. Yet he was giving advice on, and the reason his credibility is because he owned 6 Bored Apes that he bought at the top. Now, hey, we've all bought at the top and sold at the bottom. I'm kind of really good at that. But I just think it's important for us to not only do our own damn research, but don't judge a book by a cover. Remember that we still are just getting started today. We have so much more that we can do together. And even the projects that have been around for a while haven't been around that long. And for me, that just is exciting, an opportunity for us to learn together, grow together, because we are greater than me. Until tomorrow, my friends, make it a great day. And remember, we do have the AI art drop happening on Friday, October 7th. At 11 a.m. There is only 11 of each available, so make sure you jump over there and get that. And I'll talk to you tomorrow. Cheers.